Okay, so we know that we have to be creative, and there's a couple of different ways that we know how we can do it. But really, a lot of you are probably out there saying, I don't know, I'm not a creative person. There are creative people in our organization. There are ways that all of us can learn to be creative. The first one is simply something called third choice. Let's say you've had a meeting and you want to send out some minutes from the meeting. Okay, what's the first choice of the subject line of the email that goes out? The one you write every single time. Let me guess. Minutes from the meeting? So that's your first choice. What's your second choice? Minutes, maybe? And then your third choice. Well, your third choice could be something like, we started with muffins. That's right. We started with muffins, but we went on to create a lot of great things in this day. Please find the minutes from the meeting attached. The second way, the second technique, it's something called yes and. So let's say a comedian has something. Do you think they sit down and they kind of start typing away at a computer and just within seconds a great comedic bit comes out? No. They start with a nugget and they build on it and they build on it and they build on it. The final and the best and the most funniest bits they've got often take days, weeks, months, sometimes years to craft, where they're continually tweaking and adding on. Yes, and. You take an initial idea and you build on it. A third technique that a lot of comedians use is something called the 360-degree technique. Now, let's take a very simple problem. Your grandfather is having a birthday party, and you're in charge of organizing the party, but you want to make it different. You want to make it a little bit more memorable. Well, let's take a look at the average normal birthday party. You send out invites, people show up, the guest of honor comes in, you yell, "Surprise!" That's right, then you have cake with candles and presents, and that's pretty much it. It's nice, but it's not that different. Well, this is when we bring in 360 degrees. What else do we know about Grandpa? So let's go all the way around Grandpa's life and let's look at every other aspect in detail. What else does he like? Well, he likes fast cars. So that means you can take him to a go-kart track. Something that's relevant to Grandpa and something that the people invited will remember. That's the 360-degree way to do it. So we know that we have to be creative. We've identified 3 ways that we can be creative, and even 3 techniques to use to get there. Now, along the way, you can probably learn a little bit more from our friends in the comedy business. Number 1, the number 1 rule of comedy. What is it? Can anybody? Can you in the back? No, it's know your audience. That's right, know your audience. I've done enough corporate comedy gigs to know that making lawyer jokes to a room full of lawyers is probably not the best way to go. But making lawyer jokes to a room full of sales guys, they love it. When you're creative in business, you have to kind of keep in mind who it's for. Who is the audience that's receiving these ideas? Is it senior management? Is it peers? Is it subordinates? Is it clients? Is it suppliers? And once you know who that is, you can tailor the creative message in which you're coming up with or the ideas you're putting forward to that audience. In comedy, knowing your setting is just as important as knowing your audience. That's right. All you have is a mic, some lights, and some audience members. If that mic doesn't work, it's not going to look good. So comedians, you'll notice, are very particular about the details surrounding their sets. Who's on first? How long are they going? Where's the mic going to be? Is it going to be in the stand? Is it going to be out of stand? When are you flashing the lights? Where do I go after that? How are the sight lines? Very, very picky about very specific details. We can do the same in business. If we have to convince others that our ideas are brilliant, we have to look at all the components of how we're going to get that across. You know what? When we have great ideas, sadly, we don't have people converting over immediately. That's right, sometimes people disagree with us. Well, in comedy, we call this the heckler. That's right. And in comedy, there are two types of hecklers. You have the active heckler, the person who says, "You suck!" And you have the passive heckler. They don't even know you're on the stage. You know, it's the same in business. Now, let's say we have a great idea or a great solution to a problem. Somewhere along the way, we may encounter people who, quite frankly, disagree with us. We may have the active heckler. That's right, the person who is in a room, and they're hearing you, and they're understanding you, and they're disagreeing with you, and they're voicing that opinion. You know what? This is the type of heckler you want in the room, because you can engage them in conversation, really get at the heart of what they don't like, and what you can maybe change in your idea to satisfy their concerns. I think it's going to be over budget. Oh, really? Well, budget isn't a concern. We can do an analysis of that. I don't like the color red. Really? We'll make it blue. You're engaging them and you're solving the problem right before you. Now, the passive heckler, it can be a little more difficult. There are ways that we have to get the passive heckler on our side. The first thing is to notice that they're a passive heckler in the first place. We have to identify them and we have to pull them in. You know what, Jim? You're not saying a heck of a lot over there. I'm wondering if you have any concerns. No, I'm okay. Really? Because I'm sensing that you're not buying what I'm saying. Well, I do have a little bit of concern about the budget. Oh, well, let me address that. You see, you've brought them in, you've engaged them into what you're saying, and you've satisfied their concerns right away, instead of letting them leave the room and kill your idea. The active heckler and the passive heckler have to be dealt with in the exact same way in both comedy and in business. Okay, the last technique that I'll talk about that we use in comedy is something called never ignoring the reality. Let's paint the scenario. There's a heckler in the room. I'm on stage doing a set. The heckler yells out, "You suck!" Well, of course, everybody heard it. We all know what happened. We all know it exists. And this happens in business all the time. We make a mistake, and what do we try and do? We try and cover it up and hope people won't notice. They do. So why don't you use that to your advantage? Let's say, for example, you're someone who is constantly late to a meeting. Right? The meeting starts at 10 o'clock. You show up at 10:07. You know that you're just going to try and slide in. How many times have you done this? "I am sorry, I'm a little late." Yeah. Yet people know you're late. Instead of doing the same old approach, "I'm really sorry," well, you have some fun with it. Don't ignore the reality, but put a creative spin on it. When you walk in the room, say, "Hey, is this the 10:07 meeting?" You make people smile. They'll know that you haven't ignored the fact that you're late, but you know what? They'll probably be in a better mood that you took a more creative spin on addressing that issue. Okay, we've learned a lot from stand-up comedians and from comedy about being creative in the workplace here today. Well, let me just finish with this. You know, organizations don't grow. They don't. It's true. And organizations don't grow revenue. And organizations don't cut costs. And organizations certainly do not become creative. People do. An organization is simply the sum of all the decisions of the people within it make. That's right. So if each of us within our organizations makes a different decision, makes one little step towards being a little more creative, the organization as a whole will benefit. And I bet we'll probably have a little more fun along the way too.